The sleek, black sports car roared down the winding mountain road, its engine purring like a tiger ready to pounce. Inside, Alex Turner, a billionaire and the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire, sat comfortably in the leather seats, lost in his thoughts. His life was one of power, wealth, and privilege. He had everything any man could wish for, money that could buy anything, fame, status, and endless opportunities. He was at the pinnacle of success, a man who had conquered the world. But on this particular day, something was different. There was a certain unease in the air. The clouds hung heavy above, casting a dark shadow over the valley below, and the road ahead seemed longer than usual. Still, Alex wasn't concerned. He was used to the thrill of speed, the rush of driving his custom-built sports car, and nothing ever seemed to faze him. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue across the horizon as Alex pressed his foot harder on the accelerator, eager to feel the wind rush past him. The car sped up, tires gripping the road as he leaned into the turns. The thrill of it all made him feel invincible, as if nothing in the world could stop him. But as fate would have it, the very thing that had always made him feel in control, the rush of speed, was about to betray him. Without warning, the car's tire hit a patch of wet gravel on a sharp bend. Alex's eyes widened in shock as the car slid across the road, out of control. His heart pounded as he tried to steer the car back onto the road, but it was too late. The vehicle swerved violently, crashing through the guardrail and plummeting down the side of the cliff. Time seemed to slow as Alex's mind raced. He could feel the car twisting in the air, tumbling like a leaf in the wind. The world around him turned into a blur of chaos. His thoughts flashed between his family, his company, and the legacy he had built over the years. Was this how it was all going to end? In an instant, everything he had worked for, everything he had ever cared about, seemed to vanish into thin air. Then, the impact. The car slammed into the jagged rocks below with a deafening crunch. Alex's body was thrown violently against the seatbelt as the world around him shattered. His vision blurred, and the air around him felt thick and suffocating. His head slammed into the dashboard with a brutal force, and his body went limp, the world around him fading to black. It wasn't until several moments later that Alex's groggy eyes fluttered open, only to be greeted by searing pain. His head throbbed as though a hammer was pounding against his skull, and his chest felt as if 1,000 pounds were pressing down on it. He struggled to breathe, each inhale coming in shallow gasps. His left arm was twisted at an unnatural angle, and blood oozed from his forehead where he had hit the dashboard. The car was a mangled wreck, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and gasoline. For a moment Alex could barely comprehend what had happened. He blinked repeatedly, trying to focus, trying to make sense of his surroundings. The reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut. He was stranded in the middle of nowhere, alone, and possibly on the verge of death. His pulse raced as panic began to set in. But just as the fear began to consume him, he heard something that made his heart skip a beat. A voice, faint but clear, "Hold on, I'm coming." Alex's vision was blurry, but through the haze, he saw a figure approaching, moving quickly, with determination in every step. It was a woman. She appeared out of nowhere, seemingly materializing from the dense forest that surrounded the wreckage. She was dressed in a simple nurse's uniform, her face focused, but calm, a sense of purpose in her every movement. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't startled by the sight of the wreck. She was there to save him. For a moment Alex thought he was dreaming, that this was some sort of hallucination brought on by the shock and blood loss. But no, the woman was real, and she was coming closer. She knelt beside the wrecked car, her hands moving with precision, assessing the situation. "You're going to be okay," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Just hang in there. Alex wanted to speak, to thank her, to ask who she was. But his body was too weak. His chest tightened as he struggled to breathe, and his eyes began to close again. But just as he thought he might lose consciousness, he felt her gentle hands on his face, steadying him. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "Help is on the way." In that moment, everything in Alex's world seemed to blur away, leaving only the feeling of her touch, her calming presence. He felt a strange sense of peace in her hands, as though, for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. The fear and panic that had gripped him moments earlier slowly began to fade, replaced by a sense of trust in this woman, this stranger, who had come out of nowhere to save him. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but she never left his side. She continued to apply pressure to his wounds, her every movement precise and purposeful. Even though Alex could barely keep his eyes open, he knew she was doing everything she could to keep him alive. And then, just as Alex's vision blurred again, he heard the distant sound of sirens. The woman's voice came through again, clear and confident. "They're here, you're going to be okay." When the paramedics finally arrived, it was the woman who directed them, instructing them on how to stabilize Alex and transport him to the hospital. She didn't miss a beat. She was in control, calm and collected, as if this was an everyday occurrence for her. Alex was loaded onto the stretcher, his mind clouded by the pain, but he couldn't shake the feeling of gratitude and awe he had toward this woman. He didn't even know her name, yet she had saved his life. As they rushed him to the hospital, Alex could barely stay conscious. His body was broken, his mind foggy, but one thought kept circling in his head: who was this woman? This was the beginning of a journey that would completely alter the course of Alex's life. He had been given a second chance, a chance that many people would give anything for. But it wasn't the life he had built, the money, or the luxury, that was going to change him. It was the woman who had appeared out of nowhere, the woman who had saved his life. As he lay in the hospital bed, barely able to move, his thoughts were consumed by her. Who was she? Why had she been the one to save him? And most of all, why did he feel as though something profound had shifted within him, something he could not quite explain? All he knew was that this woman, this stranger, had given him something he had never truly had before. Hope. This is just the beginning of Alex's transformation, a journey from a man who once saw life as a game to a man who would learn that there was far more to life than wealth and status. The woman who saved him wasn't just saving his life in a physical sense. She was saving his soul, and soon Alex would find out just how much his life would change because of her. The world of wealth, status, and luxury that Alex had always known seemed distant now, as if all the things he had so carefully cultivated over the years meant nothing in comparison to what he was experiencing. His life had been marked by indulgence, luxury, and the constant pursuit of power, but none of it had prepared him for the profound shift that was about to occur in his life. His body was still healing, but his mind was in turmoil. Alex had always believed that money was the key to happiness and success. It had been his world, his passion, and the foundation of his identity. But now, as he lay in that sterile hospital bed, his body aching from the injuries he had sustained in a car crash, he felt a deep sense of discomfort. What was the point of all this wealth if it couldn't save him from the fragility of life? And then there was Sarah, the woman who had saved him, the woman who had done something that no amount of money could have done. She had saved his life when all seemed lost. At the time of the accident, Alex hadn't even known who had come to his rescue. His memory of that night was foggy. He remembered the crash, the sharp pain, and then the overwhelming sense of helplessness. But then there had been a figure, Sarah, who had come into his life like a beacon of light in the darkness. She had pulled him out of the wreckage, tended to his wounds, and made sure he was alive. It was a kindness so pure, so selfless, that it left Alex speechless. What had driven her to do such a thing? A woman from a small town, working as a nurse in an ordinary hospital, had risked her own life to save his. Why? When Alex finally opened his eyes in the hospital room, Sarah was by his side, sitting quietly in a chair. Her expression was calm, her eyes tired but gentle. The stark contrast between her simplicity and the grandeur of his usual world was jarring. Alex was used to being surrounded by servants, drivers, and luxury. But Sarah, with her modest clothes and quiet demeanor, seemed like an enigma in his life. He could barely speak, but the first words he managed were filled with gratitude. "You saved me," he said hoarsely. "How? Why?" Sarah smiled, but there was no arrogance in her smile, no pride. It was as though saving him was just the right thing to do, something that any human being would do for another. "There wasn't much to it," she replied softly. "I just did what needed to be done. You were in trouble, and I helped, that's all." The simplicity of her words left Alex stunned. He had been in life-threatening danger, and yet, to Sarah, it seemed like a natural course of action. She wasn't focused on the fame or fortune that could come from saving a man like him. She wasn't even looking for recognition, it was just what she did. Alex was overwhelmed by the thought that someone could live so selflessly, without any expectation of reward. It made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: humility. For the next few days, Alex found himself spending more time with Sarah. He learned that she had grown up in a small town, working as a nurse in the local hospital. She didn't have a glamorous life by any stretch of the imagination. Her life was simple, but it was filled with purpose. As they talked more, Alex discovered that Sarah didn't care for the trappings of wealth. In fact, she had never cared for anything material. She had spent most of her life working to help people, to make a difference in the lives of those who were suffering. One evening, as the hospital room quieted and Alex's recovery progressed, he decided to ask Sarah something that had been on his mind for days. He had to know more about the woman who had so selflessly saved him. "Why did you help me?" Alex asked. "You didn't know me, why take the risk?" Sarah looked at him, her eyes reflecting something deep and honest. "Because it was the right thing to do. I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. For my peace of mind. Helping others is what makes me happy, Alex. I don't need wealth or fame to feel fulfilled. All I need is the knowledge that I've made a difference." Alex was taken aback. For the first time in his life, he was hearing someone speak about the value of human life, the importance of doing good for the sake of good, and the joy that came from helping others. This was a stark contrast to everything he had ever known. Alex had spent years building his empire, amassing wealth, and surrounding himself with people who only cared about his money and power. He had always been driven by ambition and the desire to climb higher in life, believing that more money and more success would lead him to happiness. But now, as he looked at Sarah, he realized that none of his wealth could compare to the joy she found in the simple act of kindness. The next day, Alex made a decision. He asked Sarah to meet him at a luxurious restaurant in the city. He wanted to show her his world, to offer her a taste of the life he lived. He hoped that, perhaps, this would give her a different perspective. Maybe she would understand that all the things he had could offer her a life of comfort and pleasure. But when Sarah arrived, Alex was shocked by her reaction. She wasn't awed by the opulence of the restaurant, nor was she impressed by the extravagant decor or the lavish dishes. Instead, she seemed uncomfortable, out of place. She sat across from Alex with a quiet demeanor, her eyes not focused on the fine china or the expensive wines, but on the people around her, the workers, the servers, and the lives beyond the walls of the restaurant. "This place, it's beautiful," Sarah said, but her voice didn't carry the enthusiasm Alex expected. "But I don't need any of this. I find more beauty in the small moments, in the kindness people share with each other, in the things that can't be bought." Alex didn't know how to respond. The woman sitting before him had everything. He thought people wanted success, wealth, and luxury, but she didn't care for any of it. Her happiness didn't come from the material things he had spent his life pursuing. It came from something far more profound. Weeks went by, and Alex found himself questioning everything he had ever believed in. As his body healed, so did his heart. He began to understand the value of life in a way he never had before. Sarah's influence had begun to shift his perspective, but it wasn't until one fateful conversation that Alex realized just how deeply his life was about to change. One day, Alex, now fully recovered, decided to meet Sarah again. This time, however, it wasn't to impress her with his wealth or to show her his world of luxury. He had a question he needed to ask. "Sarah," Alex began, his voice serious, "I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. I've been thinking about it, and I want to offer you something. I want to give you a fortune. I want to make sure you never have to worry about anything for the rest of your life. You've saved me, and now I want to return the favor." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of surprise and amusement. She took a deep breath, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Her words, when they came, were calm but firm. "I appreciate your offer, Alex," Sarah said, her voice steady, "but I don't need your fortune. I don't want it. What I want is for people to understand that life is about more than wealth. It's about kindness, compassion, and doing what is right. That's the true treasure." Alex sat in stunned silence. He had expected Sarah to be impressed, to accept his offer, to be grateful for the life of luxury he was offering her. But instead, she had rejected it without hesitation, without even a second thought. Her rejection of his wealth shook him to the core. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and for the first time, Alex saw clearly. He saw that all the money, all the power, all the success, none of it mattered if he didn't have the right values. Sarah had opened his eyes to the truth, that the richest people weren't the ones with the most money, but the ones with the most heart. "I don't want your fortune," Sarah repeated. "But if you want to do something for me, Alex, then use your wealth to help others. Use it to change the world for the better, to make a difference in the lives of those who need it the most. That would be a far greater gift than anything money can buy." Her words echoed in Alex's mind long after their conversation ended. It was a turning point, a moment of reckoning. Alex had always believed that money could solve everything, but now, for the first time in his life, he realized that true wealth wasn't measured by the size of one's bank account. It was measured by the kindness one shared with the world, by the love one gave, and by the impact one had on the lives of others. And so, from that day forward, Alex began to make choices that reflected the lessons Sarah had taught him. He no longer lived for himself, he lived for others. He used his fortune to make a difference, to create opportunities for those less fortunate, and to build a legacy that would last long after his wealth had faded. The woman who had saved his life, who had turned down his fortune, had unknowingly transformed him in ways he never could have imagined. Sarah had given Alex the greatest gift of all, the gift of perspective, and in doing so, she had changed his life forever. Earnings, power, luxury. These were the words that had defined Alexius' life for as long as he could remember, a man who had lived in excess, driven by the desire for more, never once questioning the need for wealth, fame, and status. But what he didn't know What he couldn't have predicted was that all of this would come to an end in a way he would never have imagined. The day Alexius first offered Sarah a portion of his fortune was supposed to be a moment of triumph. The culmination of his efforts, the reward for saving his life. But instead, it turned out to be the day that would change everything. The day that revealed to him just how far removed his sense of reality had become from the true meaning of life. As Sarah sat across from him, her presence seemed so calm, almost ethereal, like she didn't belong in the same world as the one Alexius inhabited. He gazed at her, waiting for her to accept what he had planned, the grand offer, the one that would guarantee her happiness for the rest of her life. "You saved my life, Sarah. And in return, I want to give you something that would change your world," Alexius said, his voice full of gratitude. His eyes glimmered with hope, thinking that surely she would accept the opportunity to live a life of luxury and comfort. "You can have anything you want, my house, my wealth, my businesses. It's all yours." He watched her closely, anticipating her reaction. He had thought long and hard about this moment. He had imagined her overwhelmed with gratitude, asking him how she could ever repay him. He had even imagined her at a loss for words, simply accepting whatever he offered. But what happened next was beyond anything he had ever considered. Sarah's eyes, which had once sparkled with a quiet yet profound wisdom, now filled with a kind of sadness. She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing something deep within herself, and then slowly, she spoke. "I appreciate your offer, Alexius, I truly do," she said, her voice steady but calm. "But I cannot accept your fortune." Alexius' mind reeled in confusion. What was she saying? "What do you mean?" he stammered, his heart racing. "I'm offering you a life most people could only dream of. Money, power, security, everything you could possibly want. Why would you refuse?" The air in the room grew thick, and Alexius could feel his own heart pounding in his chest. He had never encountered anyone who would turn down such an offer, especially from a man like him. He had given her the chance to escape her simple life, to leave behind her modest existence, and yet she was rejecting it. Sarah remained still, her expression soft but firm. She knew the decision she had made, and nothing was going to change her mind. "I don't need your fortune, Alexius," she said, her voice so gentle it almost seemed to whisper. "What I need is something money can't buy. What I need is something far more valuable than anything you can offer." Alexius was taken aback, unable to comprehend her response. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Was she crazy? Was she blinded by her modest upbringing to the point where she couldn't see the opportunity staring her in the face? "You're not making any sense," he nearly shouted, but his voice cracked with disbelief. "This is the chance of a lifetime. You can have everything, everything you've ever dreamed of. Why would you throw that away?" Sarah's gaze remained steady, unwavering. She wasn't angry, nor was she upset. She was simply resolute. "I don't need a mansion to be happy," she said quietly. "I don't need an expensive car or a private jet. I don't need to live a life of excess. I have seen the world differently. I have seen what it means to truly live, Alexius, to give, to care, to help others. These are the things that matter to me, not money." The silence between them was deafening.